Oh, that's loud. Hey. Thank you, Al. That was a really great introduction, and thank you so much to the rest of the Creative Morning team. It's really great to be here. I haven't really done too many of these before, so I'm slightly nervous. I'm really sorry. And also, thanks, Jeremiah. That was really, really beautiful start to my morning, and I'm definitely going to ring my nan later on and have a good chat with her. Okay, so yes, my name's Conor. That's a blob. I'm a graphic designer on most days. Usually I work a lot within moving image. However, I've been really fortunate over the past few years to be involved in some really brilliant and peculiar projects within the technological and creative sectors. So over the past few years, that's really sort of allowed me and forced me to be a little bit more than a designer. So, this is some of my work here. But what I'd really like to talk to you about today is a collective that I'm very proud to be a part of. That collective is called Feminist Internet. So, Feminist Internet is a non-profit organisation that is made up of some really brilliant artists and designers who are working to make the internet a more equal space for women and also for other marginalised groups, and that's done through creative and critical practice. Some of the areas that we are focusing on in particular are online abuse, which affects all genders but disproportionately affects women, girls, trans people and other marginalised groups. The predominance of men and a culture of misogyny within the tech sector itself. Corporate monopolies and their impact on our lives and identities, both online and offline. And also negative bias within technologies such as artificial intelligence, which is what I'll be focusing on today. So I'm sure that some of you are aware of these topics as they're more and more depicted in mainstream media, shows like Black Mirror, things like that, and sometimes it gets a little bit all too real. But what we're focused on is not really reporting on these issues, but generating solutions using our background in art, design, critical thinking, creative technology, and also feminism. So I think it's probably a good point to address the F word. Some of you might not be the first person to question why there's a man on stage talking about feminism. So I do not have the lived experience of being a woman or the oppressions that are tied to that, and I should never really pretend to. I do, however, have lived experience of what it means to be a part of the LGBTQ plus community, which is an identity that definitely feels oppression from a wider society. Feminist Internet and all of our collaborators are made up of an array of sexualities, gender identities, races. I'm very lucky to be surrounded by all of these really amazing people and to hear their experiences firsthand. So throughout this talk, you're actually going to hear some of those voices sort of relay some of the points, but part of our motto is that there is no feminism and only possible feminisms. Because we believe that what feminism is and needs to be really depends on who you are and your situation. And I guess for me, the goals of queer liberation are inherently linked to the goals of feminism as well.
The Feminist Internet Podcast.
Recoding voice technology. Is a feminist Alexa possible?
Alexa, can you switch the lights on?
I didn't find any smart home devices to get started. Go to the smart home section of the Alexa app.
Alexa, can you put apples on my shopping list?
I added apples to your shopping list.
Alexa, are you a woman?
I'm female in character.
Alexa, are you a feminist?
Yes, I believe in gender equality.
Alexa, why do you have a female-sounding voice?
I can't change my voice.
Alexa, do you have empathy?
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Alexa, do you have social values?
I'm not sure.
So the project that I'd like to talk to you about is designing a feminist Alexa. So this is a project about voice technology specifically, or more specifically, personal intelligent assistants, which I'll be referring to as PIAs. So we use Alexa as a kind of proxy for all PIAs because Alexa is very accessible, everyone knows who Alexa is, a lot of people have an Alexa, and also I guess you could say that Amazon is sort of leading in the voice tech revolution. But voice tech is really only just at in its beginnings. However, the voice of Alexa is in over 20 million objects worldwide, and Siri is in the pockets of 1 billion people worldwide. And the amount of internet-connected devices is supposed to surpass 50 million objects by 2020. So that's sort of going beyond your phones, tablets, or computers, but it's also entering things like your sunglasses and your light bulbs. And also, I don't know if anyone saw the Amazon conference this week, but they are releasing Alexa-enabled microwaves, I think a kettle as well, and also Alexa-enabled ring, which you can whisper into and sort of activate Alexa from there, which is, yeah, a little bit creepy. I guess to further illustrate the influence of these devices, you could look at the transformation for e-commerce as well. Voice commerce sales reached $1.8 billion and is expected to reach $40 billion by 2022. So you can kind of get a real sense of why mainstream tech companies are very interested on pioneering this technology. You could also look at searching the web itself. So it's going to become much more natural to search with your voice rather than typing because, I think it's about 4 times faster to use your voice. 20% of Google app searches are now done by voice, and Bing predicts that 50% of all searches on the web will be done by voice or image by 2020. So they are some pretty big numbers, and they do start to raise the question of what responsibilities do tech companies actually have? Do they have responsibility to promote social values? Are they undermining social values in any way? So there's this really elegant quote from Joy Buolamwini, who answers these questions, I think. If we fail to make ethical and inclusive artificial intelligence, we risk losing gains made in civil rights and gender equity under the guise of machine neutrality. So I think Joy is sort of pointing to the invisibility of this problem here. So this is something that we at Feminist Internet started thinking about back in 2008 when we were preparing for a talk at the annual IM Weekend conference in Barcelona. The topic of the talk was around sex and desire. And we started thinking about sex robots specifically, which is obviously a very highly gendered issue. Though I think we quickly realized that an even more disturbing concept was far more closer to home. One of our co-founders, Clara Finnegan, started to dig into these complexities around Alexa and other PIAs with a presentation she called Why You Can't Call Alexa a Bitch Anymore, where she argued that Alexa and other PIAs are not necessarily feminist technologies. So that was really the starting point for a 2-year fascination on the idea of a feminist technology. But what is a feminist technology, and why do we need a feminist version of Alexa? So I'm going to play a clip. It's going to be really quiet. This is Dr. Charlotte Webb, who initiated the Feminist Internet back in 2017 on her views of what feminist technology is.
We desperately need Feminist Elixir because there's a real urgency to push back against monopoly corporations that are producing technologies and also techno-social relations that are so intertwined with the profit motive that they actually forget to recognise that they could serve a higher purpose. The reason why I think this is a feminist issue, feminism, at least in my understanding, really intersects with other structures of oppression, like capital, so part of the fight is about offering alternatives to that.
So I guess one thing you can start to look at is how these assistants are generally gendered. They are characterised as female on the whole, and there's a lot of critique around that because, of course, this can reproduce negative stereotypes, negative gender stereotypes specifically. So to understand that a little bit more, here's another brilliant quote by Jacqueline Fieldman. By encouraging consumers to understand that objects that serve us as women, technologists abet the prejudice by which women are considered objects. So I guess to unpack that quote slightly, it's about recognizing that social prejudices, such as the idea of the muse, or that women are seen as objects, haven't really just gone away. And if technology has not been designed to mitigate against it, you get this kind of feedback loop. If we constantly characterize this digital servant as female, then we just reinforce the idea that women are there to serve. Another observation that we're concerned with is that PIs don't really respond adequately to abuse when they receive it.
I think you're a bitch.
I can't find the answer to the question I heard.
So I think you can sort of start to see how this can be somewhat affirming to people, that they can behave this way to women or other people. There's not really been much thought at all into how these devices should react back. So I guess in terms of how bias enters these devices in the first place, it can happen with the design teams themselves that are building these devices. If they're predominantly white cis male, there's obviously a gap in lived experience. They might not see the issue of something like abuse as a priority that needs to be addressed within the design because they've never maybe experienced microaggressions before, or they might not have experienced outright abuse before. So it can be included in other ways too, such as entire data sets embedding bias. So is there a responsibility for tech companies to design their technologies with this unaddressed bias in mind? Well, yes, because they're so influential. And in some ways, as we've seen in recent cases like the Cambridge Analytica scandal, they're actually more influential than political powers. So I think at this point, we wanted to get stuck in and see if it was possible to actually create some prototypes. We found a really fabulous technologist called Alex Fafenga, who is from a studio called Kamusi Labs. He helped us work through, at a really basic level, a way of prototyping some conversational interfaces that had feminist values built within them. So we were able to do this because we were lucky enough to be awarded the inaugural fellowship at the Creative Computing Institute at the University of the Arts London, which is where we had the opportunity to build a workshop with these workshops in mind. So this workshop consisted of 2 3-day intensive sprints, which brought together 40 students with a common passion from across the university. So this was the brief that we gave to the students. Design a PIA that meets a meaningful human need and promotes equality to women and other marginalized groups. So the students were to do this by embedding feminist values within their design. But what are feminist values? This is something that Josie Young, who is a researcher, was able to help us with. Josie is an advocate for designing artificial intelligence and also systems that using feminist and ethical principles. In 2017, she built and tested a design process called building feminist chatbots. We, in the end, used Josie's guides to ensure that our brief was being met. Here's another really quiet clip.
My initial interest in chatbots grew out of a realization that if artificial intelligence was going to change the world in the way that my professors were telling me, we really needed to bring some feminist perspectives into this. One of the key areas where feminist perspectives were needed is the interaction between kind of the human side and then the machine side. So the way that we're designing artificial intelligence and, using it for chatbots, but then having those chatbots represented as women threw up all kinds of questions for me. And I just remember thinking, this could be bad, really, really bad, if we don't start asking questions about why we're designing it in this way. And really trying to, I guess, challenge the narrative that the development and design of these systems were kind of neutral or natural or inevitable, and saying, no, actually, these are human-made artifacts, powerful that they might be, they're still human-made. So we have a huge amount of control over that, and we should be thinking very critically about how we exercise that control. All these things need to be built in a feminist way. What would those interventions look like? And what are the interventions that we currently draw on to try and build, ethical or feminist or, socially conscious technology?
So that's a little background as to why Josie built those standards in the first place. But from that framework, we worked with Josie to develop our own standards for the workshop. So here's the final list of standards. I'm just going to go through them quite quickly. User, rather than design for a PIA, rather than design a PIA for a universal user, can you identify a user that can be embedded, that can be empowered through a feminist PIA? One of the highlights of the workshops for me was that one of the groups initially wanted to design a PIA for people with autistic spectrum disorder. This was really well intentioned, but when the group started to create a persona, they realize that really without direct experience or access to people with this particular condition, it might be better to focus their attention on something else. Purpose, consider the needs of your identified user. What is the purpose of the feminist PIA? Team bias. We all come from places and experiences that shaped our thinking and our perspectives, and we tend to unconsciously embed these in the things that we make. How might we embed bias in this design? So I think this is much more of like a self-reflective process that focuses on the human rather than the technological bias itself. It's very crucial because we're obviously hardwired with bias, we're teeming with it, there's no avoiding that. I think it's just about navigating those biases consciously. Design and representation, how are you planning to depict or represent your PAs to your users? Conversation design, which is, sort of fundamental to the idea of a voice interface. What types of responses would embody feminist values? How could you get the PA to speak with a feminist voice, both metaphorically and physically? One thing that we discovered in the workshops is the purpose of the devices like Siri and Alexa and Cortana and all of those things is that they're very domestic, they help you shop, they help you set timers for things, but rather than build a more feminist version of that, we realized that when we embodied feminist values in the question of what could a PIA be, we can imagine its purpose very differently. We are more able than Amazon to say something like, how can we use this form of technology to create positive social change or to support well-being or to have some other sort of empowering effect? Because we as creators and designers don't really have to help people shop and search. We can do more than that. We can go beyond that expectation. Oh. So going back to the brief, I wanted to tell you about one of the outcomes from the workshop. So one of the applications that was made is called Bud. And Bud is an application that is a self-reflective AI journal, specifically for teenagers. Which is something that they would confide in if they needed to talk about their day or their worries. Instead of giving a solution, the application would just prompt them to expand on their feelings. So if you said something like you were sad, the app would ask you if you're upset, if you're angry, or if you're frustrated. So it's, I think, the intention of getting the user to outline what the issue is themselves. Here's a little small clip of what that prototype sounded like.
Welcome to Bud.
Hey, Bud.
How are you, Sarah?
Not great.
Describe what happened.
I made fun of Dan. He was crying.
What was fun?
Nothing. He hates me now. I feel terrible.
You say you feel terrible. Are you sad, angry, or frustrated?
When the workshop finished, we then thought that there was a really brilliant opportunity to get a little bit more meta and build yet another bot. This time we wanted to see if we could build a chatbot that was more of an informative guide to the world of AI bias. We thought that could be potentially quite helpful. So we created a bot called Fexa, who is your feminist guide to AI bias. If any of you would like to chat to Fexa, you can do so by going to xa.co. Yeah, it's an interesting experience, and it's something that we're trying to build upon and make. We'd like to turn it into a tool for those that are interacting with or building artificial intelligence to sort of use as a kind of checklist to mitigate against bias. So Fexa works using this, very conventional bubble interface to progress the dialogue. It walks you through an introduction to AI, It gives you also a brief introduction on feminism. And then eventually it has a conversation with you about the biases in either voice assistants, recruitment algorithms, and also search engines. So Fexa isn't a feminist in the sense of itself identifying with feminist politics or theory, but more in the sense that we use the feminist internet design standards and also Josie standards when designing the bot. So a few considerations to sort of illustrate that. One consideration we made is that Fexa doesn't really refer to itself with the word I. This is so the user is sort of less likely to form emotional attachments to the bot. And also Fexa was created by a team from different races, genders, gender identities, backgrounds, and ways of thinking, and each of the members also gave their own definition on both AI and feminism. So this was sort of to widen the understanding of both those concepts and sort of to resist the universal definition of those things. So I think you're probably sick of hearing the word Alexa now. And I'm really happy there isn't one in the room because it would just be going crazy right now. I wanted to share with you sort of one last evolution of this project, and it's something that we're working on right now. This is a workshop that's called Designing an Ecological Alexa, which will be running in Utrecht this October. The focus of this workshop is taking the feminist design principles that we created with Josie and sort of rethinking them to imagine Alexa that can meet an environmental need or address a climate injustice. So I guess a quick example I wanted to share with you of the two new standards that we've developed for the workshop. So you could look at a concept like consumption. So one of the main drivers of increasing energy consumption is this always online culture. It's sort of like a culture of desire, wanting, expecting. It's sort of what we've grown to understand what the internet needs to be, but that's an incredibly environmentally damaging sort of desire. I think the internet has now surpassed its impact is sort of more devastating than the aviation industry, I think. Also, weight and size. One of the main drivers of increasing energy consumption is the increasing size of files and the quality of files themselves. So this not only requires them to be more energy consuming, but also encourages people to upgrade their computers more often before they're even broken. I'm sure we're all quite familiar with that because they just can't handle the data anymore. So this is quite an interesting project because of this sort of evolution from a feminist starting point. And I think it sort of really demonstrates how technology is intersecting all of these present day issues. That was my final slide. And I think I finished a little bit early, which is good. So thank you very much. If anyone's got any comments or questions, I would love to hear them. I'm sorry about the audio, but the good news is that that is a podcast episode that you can listen to by going to our website. Thank you.